Good afternoon, and welcome to the launch of AI in Motion, securing America's edge in safer, smarter transportation. I'm Paul Ruiz, Senior Director of Policy at SAFE. I'm glad you could join us today. U.S. leadership in transportation AI is not just about innovation, it's about competitiveness and our national security. Those who scale fastest will set the rules and shape the markets that follow. We're already seeing measurable gains in safety and efficiency, but to lead, the US must move beyond pilots to nationwide deployment. Here's how we'll use the hour. I'll begin with an overview of the report's findings, why deployment is the decisive battleground and the choke points holding the United States back. Then we'll turn to a panel moderated by Sean O'Kane of TechCrunch, featuring leaders from Upstream, Hayden.AI, and ReMo. Together, we'll explore how to scale AI responsibly, at scale, and secure American leadership in this next era of intelligent mobility. For those who are new to our work, SAFE is a nonpartisan organization advancing transportation, energy, and supply chain policies that strengthen U.S. economic and national security. Since 2005, we've partnered with Fortune 500 CEOs and retired military leaders to tackle America's most pressing energy and industrial challenges. SAFE's Coalition for Reimagined Mobility, or ReMo for short, is an initiative focused on scaling advanced transportation technologies. ReMo brings together stakeholders, conducts original research, and pushes for solutions that make our mobility systems safer, smarter, and more competitive in the global economy. To start, it helps to step back and see how far we've come. First, the analog era. Transportation was human-directed, on fixed schedules, and reactive when things went wrong. Then came the digital era. We added sensors and basic automation. That gave us data and scheduled updates, but systems still relied on routines. And now we're in the intelligent era. AI enables perception, prediction, and real-time adaptation. Systems can now be proactive, spotting risks, anticipating what comes next, and acting before harm occurs. You take the example of computer vision. It might detect a cyclist emerging from behind a truck, predict its trajectory, and signal to a vehicle or intersection to adjust brakes or timing. As the report lays out, it helps to break AI in transportation into a few core non-exhaustive categories. Machine learning can forecast congestion or anticipate component failures before they happen. Neural networks process complex data to give vehicles and systems real-time perception and adaptive control. Computer vision allows machines to interpret images and video, spotting lane markings, damaged signs, or wrong-way drivers in seconds. And generative AI creates new content and scenarios, from simulating crash conditions to drafting safety reports. Together, these tools move transportation from reactive to predictive and help optimize transportation efficiency at every level. Here's what AI in motion looks like on the ground. In trucking, AI optimizes routes to cut empty miles and uses predictive maintenance to flag issues before breakdowns. In ports, AI can coordinate cranes and berth schedules and forecast cargo surges so terminals move products faster. In emergency response, AI can use signal preemption to clear green waves for ambulances and fire trucks, cutting delays by 30%. And in critical infrastructure, computer vision crowdsources road condition data from dash cams, giving agencies a proactive, low-cost way to prioritize repairs at a fraction of the cost. Each of these examples and the 4 case studies in the report show a different piece of the AI ecosystem that's already here, delivering measurable results, but not yet scaled nationwide. To scale these kinds of gains, the US has to clear 3 hurdles. First, in energy infrastructure, AI transportation systems are hungry. Every autonomous vehicle is a moving data center, and that's before you add the power needed for training and simulation. US data centers already use power equal to 20 nuclear plants, and that demand could, at the high end, triple by the end of the decade. Our grid, our permitting, and our aging infrastructure have to keep pace. Second is a fragmented policy and deployment. Right now, we have a patchwork. Federal guidance on one side, state pilots on the other. That's healthy for experimentation. In fact, it's a core strength of the American system. But in safety critical transportation systems, state by state implementation can create friction. Regulations can vary city by city and state to state. Insurers face inconsistent liabilities, and interoperabilities can vary. And third, there's a global race to write the rules. The US has an innovation edge, but our competitors are moving quickly to set the standards. If the United States doesn't lead in deployment and standards, we risk having to follow rules written elsewhere. Let's start with energy. It's not just the total electricity demand, it's where and how that demand shows up. At one end, you've got cloud and data centers. These are hyperscale facilities where AI models are trained and massive simulations are run. A single site can draw hundreds of megawatts, and their siting drives tough questions around transmission, permitting, and new generation. And at the other, we have Edge AI. Every vehicle, intersection, and roadside unit running real time perception and decision making is essentially a distributed computer. A single level 5 AV can pull up to 2,500 watts for its sensors and compute stack, and at scale, fleets become a new class of distributed load stressing local grids. What makes transportation unique is the cloud to edge convergence. AI doesn't just concentrate demand in data centers, it distributes it across millions of moving and fixed nodes. Planning for energy can't just be about gigawatt scale clusters, it has to ensure resiliency at the edge, embodied in what's called physical AI. The White House put it plainly: AI will require new infrastructure, factories to produce chips, data centers to run those chips, and new sources of energy to power it all. Just as past industrial revolutions needed factories and railroads, this one needs chip plants, hyperscale data centers, and new sources of dispatchable power. And that's not only an infrastructure challenge, it's a governance challenge. This chart shows which federal agencies have been most active on AI rulemaking over the past decade. You'll notice the Department of Transportation. About 5 significant AI related rules compared to dozens from federal agencies like Health and Human Services or Commerce. And where DOT has acted, it's almost entirely been in aviation. And even those rules are relatively recent. Aviation moved first because the FAA has clearer federal authority and a long tradition of safety assurance. But in most other modes, rail, transit, maritime, the approach can still be described as experimental, more about pilots and grants than a cohesive federal framework. Pre-2025, the US approach centered on trustworthy AI, risk-based governance, pilots, and capacity building. DOT made progress, but mostly through guidance and experiments. This year, the federal posture shifted to acceleration. The AI Action Plan and new EOs emphasize infrastructure build-out, permitting, domestic chip capacity, and the export of the American tech stack. And states are filling the gap. In 2024, states introduced nearly 700 AI bills, with 38 states enacting almost 100 pieces of legislation. That is a step change from prior years. Texas is a great example. TxDOT's AI strategic plan maps out 230 use cases for AI, backed by an enterprise data platform and a NIST-aligned risk framework. The report also looks into what DOT is doing today. We group it in 3 buckets. Current work like safety pilots, grants, and procurement tools, such as the Small Business Innovation Research Awards. Areas aligning with the AI Action Plan. Those are regulatory sandboxes, model benchmarking, cybersecurity protocols, and efforts to modernize how public agencies buy AI. And emerging ideas, a possible virtual proving ground for autonomy, domain-specific standards, and even permitting reforms to transportation-related data centers. As you can see, DOT has a lot of activity underway, but it's spread across modes and uneven in maturity. The report goes into details if you want to dig further. The third challenge is the race to write the global standards. As I said earlier, AI in transportation isn't just about technology, it's about governance. The US today has a fragmented state and federal approach. Meanwhile, there are a number of competing global efforts and pathways. The European Union has gone the other way with its AI Act, classifying transportation AI as high risk and imposing strict oversight. And those rules apply extraterritorially, which means US firms have to comply if they want to operate in Europe. China is advancing even more aggressively. It has a vehicle road cloud system that integrates vehicles, intersections, and data centers into one architecture, backed by billions in state investment. It has already issued more than 16,000 AV test licenses and is exporting its model abroad. Beijing is also leading in patents now, with over 170,000 filings across AI fields, leveraging standards as a strategic tool. This slide pulls together the US-China comparison as a visual. On one hand, US private investment dwarfs China's. Over 100 billion last year, nearly 12 times Chinese private capital. But Beijing is closing the gap through massive state-led funds, more than 190 billion committed to AI and chips. And on deployment, the US has dozens of AI EV companies, but only one is operating abroad. China already has at least 6 firms testing internationally, including in the US, Europe, and the Middle East. The US leads in innovation and compute, but China is turning investment into deployment and global influence, especially in global standards. AI in Motion lays out 3 principles. You'll hear each echoed by our panel here in a moment. Number 1, modernize how we deploy. Government's role is to clear the path, update procurement and support test beds and sandboxes that let proven solutions scale safely. Number 2, earn the public trust. Industry's role is to show, not tell, how their systems are transparent, explainable, and accountable so safety and performance are verifiable in the real world. And number 3, compete on standards. Policy leaders must engage globally so US values of safety, privacy, and openness shape the rules rather than adapting to someone else's. With that, let's turn to our discussion, how state partners are modernizing pathways, how innovators are building trust in the tech stack, and how we win the standards race. And for that, I'd like to introduce today's moderator. Sean O'Kane is a senior reporter at TechCrunch, where he covers the transportation industry with a focus on electric vehicles and startups. He has a decade of experience reporting on business and technology of transportation. Before joining TechCrunch, Sean was a reporter at Bloomberg News, and prior to that, he spent nearly 8 years at The Verge as reporter and senior reporter covering consumer technology and transportation. Sean, over to you.
Thanks so much, Paul. I'm happy to be here. I just want to really briefly introduce our wonderful panel. We've got Renee Ray, who's the Senior Director of Strategic Growth at Hayden.AI. We've got Yoav Levy, the co-founder and CEO of Upstream. And we've got Avery Ash, the Executive Director for the Coalition for Reimagined Mobility, and also the Senior Vice President of Government Relations at SAFE. And as if 2 hats isn't enough, we're going to have him wear a 3rd hat because unfortunately, Darren Anderson from TechStot was not able to make it here in time. But lucky for us, Avery also serves on the Texas Technology Task Force for TechStot alongside Darren, and can speak to a lot of what that task force has been up to, especially with preparing that report about 230 different possible use cases of AI in transportation within that state. And I'm eager to hear more about that from Avery. So thank you all for being here, both in the audience and on the panel. And I want to start with a question to Renee. I mean, let's make this a little bit more tangible to people. As far as the work that you guys have been doing at Hayden, uh, you have a lot of technology around edge computing and computer vision with what you've been applying, and you have a couple different products that you've come up with. Tell me some of the benefits of what you've been able to do over the last few years and where you're seeing some of the biggest upside in some of the technology that you guys have been deploying.
Absolutely. Thanks, Sean. I'm thrilled to be here today to talk a little bit about Hayden AI. And I agree. I think having a tangible example, it gets very up in the clouds when we're talking about artificial intelligence and all the possibilities. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit specifically about the Hayden AI solution. So We have, in my opinion, a really excellent example of how we have taken what used to be a fairly or completely manual process, which was ticketing folks who were blocking bus lanes and bus stops. And we have leveraged edge computing and vision AI to make that a technology enabled service. So what we do is we take a couple of cameras, we take a compute box with NVIDIA chips, we take an antenna, we put all of that on a transit bus so that when the bus turns on, the cameras turn on. As the bus is traveling down the street, our computing equipment knows precisely the location where the bus is traveling, the day of the week, the time of day, a complex set of business rules that our public agency clients have given us to know what is actually enforceable, what are the precise rules that would stand up in court when someone has received a traffic ticket. And so what we're able to do is interpret in real time images that the bus is viewing, that the cameras are viewing as the bus travels along its route. We take a snippet of 8 to 15 seconds of video. That's the only data that leaves the bus, along with some metadata on location. And only those small videos are transmitted through the cloud. They go into a portal. They're reviewed by a human. That's the law of automated enforcement in the US. All of the other data is deleted from the vehicle at a time specified to us by a client. And so what that means is if a bus is traveling down a route 12, 14, 16 hours a day, what we end up with is an extremely accurate picture of what is useful to the transit agency, which is who is blocking my dedicated bus lane, who is potentially hindering disabled access to a bus stop because it's blocking a bus stop. And what we've been able to do is deliver to transit agencies a solution that is helping them improve operational performance. And that's because the goal of what we're doing is driver behavior change. And I'm very happy to say that the clients we work with are seeing that behavior change even after just a couple of years of the program that they've enacted. So, as an example, we've been live with WMATA and DDOT in Washington, D.C. for a couple of years. They have seen a 32% reduction in bus stop violations in a 1 year period. And, you know, those of us who work in transportation know behavior change is hard. It takes a long time. We're proud of that 1/3 data change in a year. And in New York City, which has been running this program the longest in the US, they have seen that only 9% of motorists get a second traffic ticket. Folks get that single ticket, they get a warning during the warning period. They're not interested in getting another one. And so we're seeing data that is leading to that behavior change and to outcomes in New York where they've seen speeds of the bus increase on average about 5% over the course of a route and up to 36% in highly congested areas. And what's important in transit is when we talk about scale. So if you have 20 to 30,000 bus riders in some of these MTA routes, 36% faster translates to hundreds and thousands of hours of time gained by the folks who are riding those buses.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine that sounds pretty enticing to anybody who is reliant on a bus in a major city. I know that that would have made it more of an option when I used to live in New York City if someone was promising me 30% faster. Um, it sounds, it sounds like a simple change, but I know that I think a lot of us are probably familiar with red light cameras for better or for worse, but also stop sign cameras that use AI these days. There's a lot of that going around. But the change of having it on the bus and having it move seems like what is actually enabling a lot of this for you guys and for your partners. Were there any really big challenges you had to overcome in making that work well?
Certainly, there were challenges. My understanding from our CTO is that the locational accuracy from a moving vehicle is much more complex than from a stationary camera at an intersection. And what we were able to do at Hayden was leverage some of the mapping technology. It's called SLAM, simultaneous localization mapping. And we were able to use some mapping technology originally designed for autonomous vehicles, where obviously being able to locate the autonomous vehicle in space is highly important to the safety of the driver, and say, let's take this technology and do something useful with it today that's going to help public agencies. And so applying that AV technology for this use case is what has allowed us to create a solution that has scaled across public agencies in the US.
That's really interesting. I want to move over to Avery because we heard a little bit about what Texas is doing, and since he's helping represent our only agency here on the panel, I'd love to hear a little bit more about maybe what some of the more we heard there's a 230 applications of this technology that the TxDOT task force came up with. Maybe give us an idea of some of the more exciting ones, or maybe even some of the ones that surprised you the most as that report came out.
Yeah, and I know Darren sent his regrets for being unable to join us. He is unfortunately still off the grid. He and I serve on the Texas Technology Task Force, which is an advisory group for TxDOT, focused on, as you might imagine, advancing and integrating advanced technologies into how TxDOT thinks about serving their customers. You mentioned the 230 plus potential AI use cases that the TxDOT had published. I think it's a really interesting example and one that other states could borrow from of how to think about AI. They really looked to not boil the ocean here, but they did cast a very wide net. So how do you think about across all the functions for TxDOT, everything from operations to back office administration, where AI could be integrated and help could actually to drive results that increase safety, increase efficiency, or productivity with really measurable goals across them. Goal here was identify a handful for pilots. There were a couple dozen in that initial pilot list, and then quickly figure out how to scale them. This does include the kind of headline grabbing items that you would usually think about when you might consider AI integration into a transportation system. Things like incident detection and response. This was a pilot initially for the Austin district, looking at how do you bring in ITS cameras, sensors, external data sets, and use those to identify with faster time and greater accuracy incidents as they take place on the roadway, and then deploy resources to actually clear those incidents. That is now being scaled to additional districts and large metros, for example, Houston. I think that really is a great pathway for how to think about rapid testing and then deployment of new technologies. There's also really interesting pieces in there around real-time and predictive traffic analytics for traffic management centers. Again, how do you leverage AI on top of camera networks and data feeds to anticipate traffic surges? That's been one of the key areas from my past life at INRIX. We've been very excited to watch Texas take a leadership role on. But then there's also really very impactful, but maybe a little bit less sexy applications. Things like contract and invoice comparison. So how do you take the incredible number of invoices and contracts that TxDOT is managing and apply some AI solutions to that allow for much greater accuracy, faster completion of an administrative process, and freeing up TxDOT staff resources to be focused on things like engineering and policy judgment rather than just paperwork. And then I think the couple I'll also flag here as most transformative, and the incident management piece at scale. I mean, every minute you're shaving off of that detection and dispatch reduces the likelihood of secondary crashes, a very real issue for a state as large as Texas. And then things like proactive congestion management. So I mentioned the ability to more rapidly identify where traffic queues might build up. If you can identify them more rapidly, you can think about actually clearing them before they emerge. This is important for things like work zones, again, where vehicle and worker safety is of utmost importance. And then also on that back office velocity, again, how do you automate things like invoicing and contract analysis and document work, which increases the value and speed of the work that TxDOT admin staff are able to do. I think these are a really interesting way to think about how a DOT can begin to really leverage all the excitement and enthusiasm around AI in a way that that really focuses on the results that you can get out of it and matches the sorts of bleeding edge, headline grabbing, keynote leading sorts of applications around actual operations and computer vision and autonomous vehicles and advanced air mobility, all those interesting topics, along with some of the administrative pieces, which can ultimately be the most impactful in terms of outcomes, outputs, and ultimately cost and efficiency as well.
As someone who also lived in Austin, the idea of using any technology to free up I-35 or traffic anywhere around that city is also a delightful idea. So I'm glad that that's somewhere that you guys are looking. And you say it might not be as sexy, but as someone who spends a lot of time reading through hundreds of pages of documents, regardless of what I'm writing about, that idea of comparing and contrasting, finding differences in contracts and invoices, I deeply understand the value of that. And I'm sure that there's a lot of people within TechSouth and other agencies who might appreciate that, as simple as it sounds. I do want to move on to Yoav, who's been patiently waiting. Yoav, what Upstream does is you guys work on making these sort of live digital twins for your customers. And I think that's one of those concepts that we've come across, especially in the automotive space or transportation in general. Over the last few years, we hear about it a lot in autonomous vehicle testing, but also in design and building of just regular vehicles. And I think it's a high level that I think a lot of people can understand. But tell me a little bit more about, what are you actually making when you make these digital twins, and what is this actually doing for customers in like the most general sense that you can come up with?
Yeah, so in Upstream, we build a cloud-based AI platform that is helping our customers to leverage the data that they have and create, like, generate insight and run AI on their data for both cybersecurity, analytics, observability, and many of the services that we actually heard here. And what we created is we call it like a digital twin, which is a real-time representation of the vehicle in the cloud. So if you think about, I have a car, it's parking outside, I have sensors, I have computers. So the digital twin creates a real-time representation of my own vehicle or the vehicles within the cloud, and in a unified way that it helps the car manufacturers, the service providers, to create a layer on top of that that can take the digital twin and run AI queries, generate services, subscription, etc. on top of that. The reason that it's actually needed is because of the nature of the data that is being sent from the vehicle to the cloud. So usually vehicles are sending telemetry data, which is like unstructured data that is going from the vehicle to the cloud, kind of a heartbeat data of sensorial data. So digital twin is actually taking all this data, unifying the data, and allowing the service providers to use it in a simple way to run AI models on top of that, to create queries, to create automation on top of that, and actually generate insight from the connected vehicle data.
And when it comes to the work that they're doing on those layers, analyzing how this sort of digital twin of a vehicle or another product responds, what are maybe some of the most common things that people are doing? Is this really about trying to poke at the security of the project the most more than anything else?
Yeah, so it's actually a generic layer that can be used for different services. Cybersecurity is primarily like the main service that is the digital twin is being used for. So the digital twin is running a detection and response layer that is actually a set of policies and rules of what is allowed or not allowed, and the ability to detect threats and remediate them in real time. There are other use cases that are more related to how car manufacturers or fleets are running predictive maintenance or proactive quality detection, with the idea of using data and AI to detect quality issues that may have a large financial impact on the company if it's related to large recalls or large warranty claims.
And it makes sense that it winds up going back to what can help these companies save the most money in some respects,
Right.
even if that does trickle down and help the customers in the end. That's really interesting. Avery, I want to come back to you for a minute because let's pull back. One of the things that Paul said as he was sort of progressing through how ReMo has been thinking about this while writing up this report is kind of that ultimate, or one of the ultimate kind of end goals of using this technology and finding ways to keep the country competitive in the global sense, and what that means for us. I'd love to hear, as someone who has straddled a couple different parts of this over the, however long it took you guys to put this together, what your thoughts are on how this impacts national security, how important this is, what, and how that should be prioritized, I guess.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that really helps to tie together, ReMo, who thinks about the future of transportation, how we do things more safely, effectively, efficiently, with SAFE, which is a nearly a 2-decade-old organization focused on really national security, energy security implications, particularly around supply chains. What we have historically seen is that many of the same technologies that get deployed in the transportation sector to help us move people and goods more effectively and efficiently are the same technologies that are leveraged for the defense sector that ensure that we're able to stay safe and competitive. These are also tend to be the technologies that we believe are going to define the next century of not just the transportation sector, but really broader applications across the economy. A great example of that would be around vehicle automation, which we view as a dual-use asset. So many of the same technologies, sensors, systems that go into an automated driving system will be leveraged for defense applications as well. When we think about the impact on transportation, an AV company like a Waymo has indicated that they think they can reduce bodily injury claims by 92%. That's a great metric that can reduce property damages by almost the same amount. Across the freight and logistics industries, this helps to cut down on empty miles and decreases delivery time. So there is really this connection between the outputs that we believe, or the outcomes that we believe will be impactful for the transportation system, with the same sorts of foundational elements that are also key for a defense application. We have historically seen the U.S. lead across both the investment, the initial deployment, and sometimes on the scaling. What we're finding now is that both on the scaling side and also the standards development side, another piece that Paul had highlighted from our paper, the U.S. Was a leader on the transition from GSM to LTE to 4G. What we have seen, though, is over the past decade, global peers, in particular China, have secured 17 to 18 times more leadership positions across technical standard setting organizations. What this really highlights is the need for the U.S. to think about the leadership on a key technology like AI, not just on the development of the technology, but on the supporting ecosystems and policies that are going to surround how these technologies come to market, are governed, and ultimately make their way into our vehicles as well as our defense systems. I think that same sort of push on the standard seat side also applies to the investment side. While the U.S. has significantly outpaced global peers on the private investment side, we have seen public investment from peers on the global stage outstripping what the U.S. has been investing. Paul had that great slide as well about how U.S. agencies are thinking about the topic of AI. What we're really trying to push for here is a coordinated national approach. And when we say national, we don't just mean here in Washington. That's coordinated across state and localities as well. Would be to think about how we can really create that sort of a roadmap necessary to ensure that we are competing and setting U.S. firms to compete on the global stage in what we believe will be the next transformative technology across the transportation sector, with ramifications across broader U.S. businesses and industries.
Is there maybe you can save this for my reporting. You don't have to get too detailed, but in general, where was the sort of interest or concern coming from? You guys work with a pretty wide group of people at SAFE, as far as who the stakeholders are in terms of national security. Was there like a particular industry or a particular type of person, whether that's role or background, where this was really coming from over the last year or so, where there was a desire to investigate this stuff more and really set expectations for where things need to go?
Yeah, and I want to highlight that the national security consideration there is on two fronts. So one would be, and this is informed by our Energy Security Leadership Council, so our group of former four-star admirals and generals that serve as a guiding force and an advisory group for SAFE on the defensive side. So concerned about the risks that that AI from foreign adversaries might pose to the U.S. And the need for us to really keep pace in what is an arms race on AI development front. The other side of that is how we can leverage AI as a proactive tool to help to address national security and for defense applications. So there's really two flavors there. One is ensuring that we are aware of the risks that AI can pose, and the other is the opportunities that AI can pose to help us to address, securing of critical infrastructure, the protection of key assets, and as we consider our own, our own national security implementations of AI, that we're playing the sort of leadership role that we would expect to be.
Renee, thinking about that piece of this, like which stakeholders are interested for you guys as a company, you're thinking about customers. What are some of the challenges of working with some of these agencies? I would imagine there might be some hesitance in adopting AI solutions, or maybe some of them are so eager and seeing some of those numbers that you guys are able to generate that it actually works pretty easily.
Thanks, Sean. A couple of different challenges. I think one of them is just within the startup itself. When you have folks who may have built their expertise in AV technologies, or you have VC investors who have mostly focused on B2C, managing expectations about working with government instead of private sector can be a challenge. So that's one thing. For instance, we find that the sales cycle for government procurement tends to be a solid 24 months. That can come as a shock to folks. But I think when we talk about public agencies that we're selling into and that we're serving, Avery already mentioned the fact that we need to earn the public trust. So public agencies are accountable to the constituents that they serve. We are seeing some AI skepticism from folks who don't understand very much of what the technology is or why it's necessary. And so, we also work with public agencies who may have been burned by running a really cool pilot with a startup where the lights turned off one day and they never responded to another email. And so demonstrating that we have staff on the ground with public agency expertise, that we're secure, that we have, we're abiding by regulations that are in place, and that we have a stable financial footing so that they can feel confident that we're going to be able to execute on contracts that we're given. I think all of those things are challenges that are really important to demonstrate. Obviously it gets easier with time, but coming out the gate with 5 or 10 employees, it's a big hurdle to get across.
Yeah, I covered an industrial AI startup recently that told me during the interview process when I was speaking with them that the most consistent question they get is, "Will you be acquired?" And they have come up with clever ways to sort of work in those assurances to these customers, because they're working with physical infrastructure, important stuff that's delivering power to people, and it's a challenge. Have you come across any sort of big existential questions like that when you guys are out there selling?
Not so many of those existential questions. We'll get questions here and there, but one of the things that we have benefited from is being able to identify folks that we think of as champions. And so they can be someone who works in bus operations, they can be a CIO level. And so what we find is we're able to build a relationship with someone at an agency who believes in the technology and sees the benefits, And having that relationship kind of helps us through some of that skepticism. And I think too, what's really important is that there may not be a hugely robust amount of AI regulation, but all of us who work with public agencies are bound by laws and regulations about other things like how do you collect data, how do you store it, what are the rules around protecting the safety if you're talking about personally identifiable information. And so we abide by a lot of regulation already in place that's not specific to AI, but that governs how we do business.
It's really interesting about finding those champions. One of the things I feel like is most revealing about some of these technologies is figuring out who's buying them or who's the one that's agitating for them. That's interesting to hear. On that note, Yoav, what have you run into as far as finding customers? Who do you tend to be selling to, and are there things that they're coming to you for that go beyond some of the cybersecurity benefits that you offer?
So yeah, so we are in addition to cybersecurity, some of our customers, mainly the manufacturers, are leveraging our platform for observability, quality monitoring, and the ability to actually understand how to build like better vehicles, how the vehicles are being used, and one of the most interesting part that I actually touched about before that is related to how the OEMs are actually providing their warranty and recall or warranty and quality operation. And today, the way it works is that when car manufacturers need to give like 3 years, 4 years of warranty, usually it's kind of a reactive process. Like customers are complaining, they go to the dealers are fixing it, and then when the car manufacturers identify that there is maybe a peak of complaints on a specific component, they're saying, oh, maybe we have something that is bigger than just a single vehicle, so they start investigation. So this investigation typically take a couple of months, then they go into the root cause of this issue and they fix it. During this time, they keep building thousands of vehicles with the same issue. So the ability to do an early detection for this issue every day means hundreds of thousands of sometimes millions of dollars. So the main use case that we see is how these quality teams can proactively use data, use AI to identify these quality indicators, these areas that they may start to need to do investigation pre-claim, actually before the customer start to complain, by implementing different models, by running correlation between vehicles from the same models using data. And this helps them to move from like kind of a reactive mode of doing quality monitoring to more proactive mode by using data. So this is something that has a very clear ROI for them. Again, every day they can save a lot of money, build better vehicles, improve the customer satisfaction and trust within the brand and with the service. And when the vehicles are becoming more complex and more advanced, these issues are becoming more common. So in the old days when we had like the older vehicles, they tend to break less, and now we look at like EVs when we're thinking that the cars are more they're like better quality, but because they're more complex, more software code, more complexity, there are more quality issues.
I don't know if you guys work with Ford, but maybe I have a couple issues I could have you send over to them. Maybe we could get a digital twin set up. Avery, I want to ask you something about what Renee just said, that sort of long cycle that can happen when it comes to working with public agencies and transportation agencies at the municipal level or even at the state level. With TxDOT, has there been anything that you've seen as far as the ability to make this easier for companies to work with them, maybe shortening those timelines or giving them a more open door to walk through if they have ideas on how to be able to improve things that are going, especially with I didn't know this until we were coming to do this webinar, that the 2026 FIFA World Cup's coming to Texas, and that's going to be probably a pretty serious stress on some of the systems there.
It sure will be. It'll be one of the largest events Texas has ever hosted. And Renee, I think it's a really helpful point to bring up that, when we think of the limitations around a new technology like AI, we oftentimes think of technological limitations. Frankly, the procurement limitations can be as challenging and jarring, particularly when working with the public sector. We have, while that has been a sticking point nationally, I can attest to that from my past life at INRIX, providing transportation data and software to cities, states, and US DOT. It is a lengthy process. It is a challenging process. Many states in particular still operate in environments where the budgets they have allocated can very easily be spent on hard infrastructure, filling potholes, paving lanes. It's much more challenging to focus it on sourcing either virtual infrastructure or technology solutions, be they data or software. Texas has been really good, frankly. And I would encourage, if we have folks from other state DOTs in the line, to pour themselves a cup of coffee and read through the aforementioned scope of where Texas is considering AI integrations. What Texas has done is used the 2020 World Cup as an opportunity to really draw more startups and innovative new businesses into their ecosystem, lower barriers to entry, created a number of innovation pilot pathways. So start on a small scale, prove some initial value, and then provide a very concrete way to scale that up into larger contracts, including leveraging things like cooperative contracting vehicles and IDIQs to ensure that not starting the procurement process from scratch every time. It makes it much more flexible to be able to both in terms of scope and timeline, to be able to work with a really robust and exciting partner like TxDOT. I also think it's worth pointing to the sandboxes that TxDOT has set up to work with the incredible amount of public data that they've available. What this means is doesn't just allow an environment for innovation to kind of thrive, but it also ensures that by the time you move through that sandboxing process, that a company or a solution is ready for deployment. You can think about things like compliance and cybersecurity hurdles before you're actually moving your way to a cold pitch to TxDOT for the procurement in an RFP. I think at the end of the day, I think that's what's worth highlighting for Texas is, where we are seeing a handful of states really get ahead of this and position themselves as the sorts of case studies that others could borrow from on how to think about flexibly and quickly integrating any new technology into what can oftentimes be very slow and antiquated workflows. And leveraging the World Cup here next year is just a really good forcing function of how to think about that.
Still hard to believe that 2026 is next year. It's further out than that. I think that's a good sort of snapshot of the state level. But one of the things that I think was really stood out to me in the report is this kind of age-old question and tension point between how policy gets set at the federal level and how policy gets set at the state level, and how those work together or how they don't work together. This brings to mind to me the fact that we're still sort of arguing about who should be setting emission standards for vehicles in the country. And should California be trying to lead more aggressive ones versus the federal administration, which 2 of the last 3 administrations doesn't see it that way. Can you tell me a bit more about that tension and why you think that's so important to highlight so much in this report?
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of opportunity. In fact, we're seeing some good early signs here for federal leadership across these topics. Some of this is applying the same principles that a state like TxDOT has applied and just rolling them up to a national level. There is a real challenge with Oftentimes we talk about patchworks of state rules. I think that is certainly, a concern across any new technology. We want to make it easy to be able to not just scale in one state, but across many states. There is, I think, a really important role that whether it's NHTSA or FHWA or USDOT fully can play around thinking about baselines for safety and liability and data governance that will be critical for the sorts of either AV frameworks or AI action plans, and prevent the sort of fragmentation and liability confusion or moratorium-driven stagnation that we've seen some risk of. I think the early signs that we've seen out of this administration to provide that level of federal guidance around AV testing, been some really exciting progress made on that front over the last couple of months. Around AI deployment, this has certainly been an administration, and we're seeing a USDOT who is looking to play catch up on that leaderboard that Paul had outlined, and really positioning the federal government as a convener and a harmonizer to ensure that we can leverage the sandbox abilities at a state level, but the opportunity to scale quickly at a USDOT or nationally driven standards approach. I think there is a handful of recommendations we made within this paper about steps that we believe USDOT and this administration could be taking now. The AI action plan in particular that the administration has come out with did influence a number of the suggestions that we included in the report. Things like how do you use NIST to lead standardized benchmarks. And then the other piece I want to flag is around the procurement side that Renee had brought up, and I'd spoken to a little bit in the context of TxDOT. I do think there is an opportunity both at the agency level as well as with the upcoming surface transportation reauthorization to ensure that there is clear funding available for the sorts of solutions and technologies that we believe will be transformative. And that there's clarity that can be provided to a state or a local level that they are empowered to make these sorts of investments in innovative new technologies necessary to help drive the sort of deployment progress that we're hoping to see.
There's a lot to chew on there, and the report really does lay out some of this in more details. And I love that you guys were able to find some sort of case study examples to guide the readers through. I would definitely recommend anybody who's been watching us and listening to us today will get a lot out of it, and will wind up thinking of a lot more questions. And to that point, we're going to throw it to some audience Q&A. We've had some questions submitted ahead of today's webinar. And one of the ones I want to start with, which sort of dovetails off what you just said, Avery, when you guys talk about this element of speed, especially with this administration, it's pretty clear that speed is of the utmost importance in their mind across many different agencies and with many different value judgments you could apply to that. I want to ask Yoav you a question that we got submitted and twisted just a little bit. Somebody was asking, whether or not cybersecurity should be treated as critical infrastructure for transportation. And my twist on that is, what's your view on as governments move faster and introduce maybe potential for risk and safety issues of the private industry filling that role? Like, do you feel that things that you are doing or even competitors in the space to you guys at Upstream are able to step in and sort of hedge against that risk that might get introduced with that greater speed?
Yeah. So first, there are areas that there are already regulation around cybersecurity for transportation and connected vehicles, like in the UN, in China, and definitely I think that cybersecurity should be considered as a critical infrastructure. I think especially AI, when you look at first, it's a new technology. Second, it can make its own decision, right? This is all about AI, so making decisions. So this should be very, very closely monitored monitored if they have potential safety issues, if they have potential issues related to privacy, data privacy, and especially the ones that are implemented within the vehicles and can make decisions. So autonomy, definitely it's something that need to have like a close monitoring and of governments. But I think also beyond that, even if you implement like a kind of a chat GPT within the vehicle, it really depends on, do you only ask question and use it for the consumer, or can it make decisions on your behalf? And are these decisions in any way could create safety issues? So I think there is a lot to understand here and to monitor closely, because the ability to go very, very fast with AI is easy, but I think in transportation we need to be very careful with AI implementations.
Another question that we have here, which is a big piece of the report. I really don't want to overlook it, which is why I want to get to it now. And I guess, Renee, we'll start with you, because I'm curious just how much you even think about this in the work that you guys have been doing. But there is this great demand for data and energy, and the balance of that as these technologies scale up in the coming years is going to be tricky. I mean, like, I don't think there's any other way to slice it. How do you guys think about that balance and those implications? And I know you're doing a lot of edge computing, so I would assume that hedges a little bit against some of those needs, but tell me how you guys think about that.
That's a great question, and certainly one of the things that's becoming much more to the fore when we talk with customers, and particularly when we talk to the public. But to your point about edge computing, I think where Hayden.AI is in a good position is the fact that we have extremely specific and narrow images that we're looking for. And so if you think about something like me going to Chat GPT and doing some meal planning, or, saying, analyze, 1,000 images that I'm going to give you so that I can train my algorithm with Chat GPT, the amount of computing and data that goes into that larger query is just exponentially greater than the kinds of edge computing that our devices are performing. And I think because of the amount of precision that goes into the way that we design our algorithms and the way that they're executed on board the vehicle, we're not using a huge amount of data to perform those functions.
And Avery, when you're taking a look at this from sort of the federal and even the state level, would you touch a little bit of both? Maybe briefly sum up maybe some of the biggest challenge or two when it comes to this stuff, because it really is a problem that I feel like a lot of people are throwing a lot of energy and effort at trying to figure out right now.
Yeah, a lot of energy, no pun intended. And to continue the pun train, you talked about this administration really being focused on speed. The House Natural Resources Committee will be considering their SPEED Act, maybe appropriately named, which focuses on permitting reform here middle of this week. The energy needs, there's kind of two sides to the coin here, and what this report has looked to focus on is why you would want AI, particularly for transportation applications. Assuming that we have cleared that bar and we can show the real tangible benefits of AI, the next question then is, what are the real energy growth needs that we expect to see from AI deployed at the scale that we expect and frankly want it to be? And that really gets down to hard power. There's lots of ways that we can think about efficiency. Absolutely. I think, Renee, your comments around edge compute, really important as we start to consider the power applications and power needs. But at the end of the day, we are going to need infrastructure, both in the form of the data centers necessary to power a lot of these systems, as well as infrastructure, the power plants necessary to create this power, whether that's from legacy sources, up to and including natural gas, to newer sources of electricity like wind and solar that have come under the spotlight recently. And then the transmission lines necessary to get that power to data centers where it can ultimately be applied. So, there is a real bottleneck that we have nationally and at a state and local level right now around that permitting process. While we all kind of agree and there's a lot of enthusiasm around this rapid growth of AI, the fundamental infrastructure underpinning it is going to require a lot more work to maneuver what is a burdensome and outdated permitting system to actually bring the new facilities online that will be necessary to ensure that we can actually power and meet the needs of all these great new applications and systems that we've highlighted here today.
Well, maybe there's a topic for a future report, not to go assignment editor on everybody here, but that sounds it's something that I thought about a lot, even just covering a lot of transportation lately. So well, listen, I feel like we're just getting started, but we got so many other questions that were submitted. I want to thank everybody out there who watched us today and listened to this wonderful panel, and also submitted questions for us to think about, help structure this whole thing. So Renee, Yoav, Avery, thank you so much for coming and being a part of this, and Paul for helping architect the whole thing, the report and the webinar. And with that, Paul, I'll hand it back over to you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Sean. But terrific panel. Thank you for moderating. Thank you to our wonderful panelists for participating in this conversation today. If there's one thing that I'm certainly thinking about, it's how is it that AI can be both trustworthy and deployable? Clearly, public agencies can't be stuck in pilot mode. They need to clear pathways to put these safety critical tools into practice. And they need to do it with guardrails that the public expects. So just to reiterate here, our AI in Motion report emphasizes 3 principles: modernizing those deployment pathways, earning trust by design, and competing through standards so that US values of safety, privacy, and openness shape the rules of the road. You've heard those principles echoed from the state perspective, industry, and policy leaders. Please take a moment and scan the QR code that's coming up on the screen here, or visit reimaginedmobility.org for the full analysis. On behalf of SAFE and ReMo, thank you for spending the hour with us. Thank you again to our moderator and panelists. Have a wonderful rest of your day.